I mean, it's one of the most famous moments in his career when the Pope was about to crown him. He grabs it and then puts it on his own head to make kind of a political statement within itself. It's a hell of a moment.
True enough. I really like it. Okay, that's just me. Now, this he crowned himself on 2nd December 1804, and then had a lavish ceremony where some of the people we'll be talking about were made marshals of the empire. Now, this really infuriated the Austrian and Russian emperors in particular because they did not consider Napoleon as an equal. He's a byproduct of the disgusting French Revolution.
He's not
He
a blue
is not
blood.
given, yeah, he's not had the divine right of rule by, like, how our families have. So that really kind of infuriated him. But the trigger for the war actually took place in 1805
Hmm.
when Napoleon crowned himself as the king of Italy. And the Italian city-states of Genoa, Parma, and Piacenza kind of recognized this. So northern Italy is pretty much under French control. This was the last straw. It threatens Austrians' possessions as well, and has cut off Naples from the mainland of Europe. So they enter negotiations with the British. And that's where the third coalition is formed without really the French knowing or there being any declaration of war. What is Napoleon doing in the meantime? The guy has assembled his army in camps along the northern coast of France for an invasion of England. And this is where he's also renamed it the La Grande Armée. And he has about 7 corps ready. So there are like around 200,000 men he's mustered, which he thinks will be more than enough to invade Britain and, you know, subjugate that nation. Once
For
Britain's
that
down,
time, yeah, that's a lot. For that time period, that's a hell of an army. Yeah.
true enough. And this is also where he will reorganize his army, but I'd like to get into that, when we come to the battle per se. But one of the main things is he's created corps, right? The ever-present corps that we talk so much about in our Pacific and World War II series. And they are just kind of waiting for, mustering of the resources of ships so that he can punch through the British Channel Fleet and land his men. However, he gets word that the coalition has been formed and they have already started their advance. And this came in the form of an Austrian army under General. So this is the map of the third coalition, I might add. So you can see it's pretty much the United Kingdom, Sweden, Russia, the Austrian Empire, and Hanover, since Britain was ruled by the Hanoverian kings, and Naples. It's pretty much going to be France fighting on land, and you just have Bavaria as the only other real land power contributing troops to the cause, because Spain is going to play a role in the naval theater. Now, what everyone assumed was Napoleon is going to repeat his moves of the previous year. They believe that he's going to focus on, northern Italy, which is what he did in 2 previous wars, in the wars of the first and second coalition. That Archduke Charles, the brother of the Austrian emperor, and I might add one of the most talented commanders of this era, he was given 95,000 troops and was to defend northern Italy around Mantua and the Adige River. And it also had Archduke Ferdinand John had 23,000 men to secure the Tyrol. So they're ensuring the Austrian Empire keeps in contact with its possessions in northern Italy. And they assume that the French are going to go with this northern Italy and through the Danube towards Vienna. However, this is where they completely underestimated Napoleon and the speed of his response, because at the same time, a 60, 70,000 strong Austrian army under General Mack wants to secure the Rhine and the forest regions that separate France and the empire. And he invades the Kingdom of Bavaria, which is a French, protectorate. And the hope was that, since they are part of the Holy Roman Empire, they're going to fight for the emperor. But well, the Holy Roman Empire had its own problems. That the Bavarian army actually had retreated from the advancing Austrians, and they actually centered themselves away to link up with the French. Now, what Napoleon does is, when he finds out about this, as you can see on this map, is he moves his army south from the northern coast of France, and they assemble at the River Rhine. Now you have Marshal Murat's corps over here is to make feint attacks towards General Mack's army, just to kind of give the impression that, hey, the French are going to cross from here. You got to focus your forces and draw them away. Because as Mack moved in further, he was cut off from the Allied armies, because there was a pretty large Russian army marching in, but it takes time for hundreds of thousands of soldiers to march the breadth of the European continent. And despite Napoleon does have the rest of the corps, so Marshal Soult, the corps on the Soult, Davout, Bernadotte, etc. All of them take a wide outflanking march, as you can see on the map here, and cut off the Austrian line of retreat. It is only around October Mack realizes, after a month of advances into this area, that he is in a really precarious position. He launches multiple offenses. The first one happening on October 8th, where you had the Battle of Wertingen, which was a campaign that was between one of my favorite marshals. So you had Murat and Lanz isolate and destroy a Austrian corps. They just suffer about 320 casualties, inflicting over 3,500 on the Austrians. And this action convinced Mack to operate on the northern bank of the Danube instead of trying to go back. And then, on further compounding his errors, he stumbles again into another defeat, where you have the Battle of Gunsberg, which takes place the next day. And again, the Austrians suffer another 2,000 casualties for 1/3 French. So as you can see, he's slowly hemorrhaging troops. And then on, the final decisive moment happened in the middle of the month, 16th to 19th of October, is when the armies under Napoleon, with the corps of Marshal Ney, trapping the Austrian army in a pincer. And that is what happens at Ulm over here, where Mack and his army is completely surrounded, and he tries to hold off because he knows that a large Russian army is approaching. But I think when they realize that the Russians will not reach, when the Russians are around 160 to 170 miles away, he's out of supplies, and the men don't have a will to fight. And you have this famous image of General Mack surrendering his army. Now, this is a big loss of manpower, because in this entire campaign of about 3 weeks, Napoleon has completely defeated an entire Austrian army, which would at full strength be around 60,000 men. And he's now struck a big blow against the coalition. What he continues to do is, with the victory of Ulm around here, he starts to march on to Vienna to try to pursue the Russian army, defeat this incoming Russian army. The main continental forces that is arrayed against him are destroyed, and there's nothing left for them. But he goes up against General Mikhail Kutuzov, who is a very experienced battlefield commander, but he's pretty cautious. And he right now knows that his men are completely exhausted after, marching from Russia all the way into Austria. And he's now outnumbered, with Mac's army being out of the equation. He starts to retreat and even lets Vienna fall. And then towards the turn of, as we approach December, he slips into Olmutz, which is somewhere in the modern day Czech Republic, where he's joined by, reinforcements from both the Austrian army and the Russian armies as well, which now gives him numerical superiority against Napoleon. Napoleon, on the other hand, is kind of in a furious mood. He is now far from home. His supply lines have also become extended. So he has to, leave units along his line of advance to ensure that the frontline units are going to be supplied. And he wants to now force a decisive battle much quicker than, sooner rather than later. Otherwise, he feels like, he's going to lose the initiative and overwhelming numbers will turn up against him.